What's good, everybody? My name is Alckemy. I recently stumbled across this plugin called the Cube, and it was really interesting. I found it from a news article from Music Radar, and it was listed as the top 10 best VST plugins. So I reached out to Lunacy.Audio, and I was like, hey, this plugin looks really interesting. Can I review it? And they got back to me in the same day. I was like, wow, thanks so much. So with that, there is this really amazing sample morphing instrument that we're going to dive into. I've got a demo tune that we're going to go ahead and take a listen to. But before we get into the review and all the other stuff, please do me a favor, help me on my journey to 10,000 subscribers. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, throw me a comment, just say hi, doesn't matter. Or let me know what you think about the plugin in itself. And to Lunacy.Audio, thank you so much for allowing me to review this. Let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to go ahead and play the demo really quick, but I'm also going to pull up the interface of this because just looking at it is actually really impressive and just really fun to kind of have as a pseudo visualizer for whatever it is that we're listening to. Stick around. I'm going to be telling you all about this that I know, but let's go ahead and take a listen to how the plugin actually sounds in the context of music. All of the upper pads melodic stuff is from this plugin. So the Cube is a really unique instrument because it's got 8 different corners that each feature its own sampler. Add a 3D type-esque kind of animation deal to it that you can customize, and you've got this really interesting instrument that's very organic because of that. So off the bat, this is pretty much what you're going to be looking at in general. The ether knob over here to the left kind of changes the dynamics between how it morphs in between the samples. To me, it just adds more high-end. Maybe a little bit more distortion or color or something to it. You've got a macro over here to the right that by default doesn't have anything, but you can assign stuff, which we'll touch on later. And then you've got an overall filter that is just a low pass. I would like there to be the ability to maybe change the slope and maybe the resonance of it, but it's nice to have just in general because again, this is kind of in mind for pads and soundscapes, etc. So looking over at the sounds tab, if I click on the overview, then we've got all of our sound engines available to us. And what we can do is we can just click on one and hit the randomize button over here, and it will automatically change the sample for us. And we can do that with all of them by clicking over to the randomize sounds here. Pretty neat. Sometimes within this though, you might get some similar ones, and again, it's just kind of a coin toss, so it's not really that hard to kind of manipulate in between that. So you might want to do randomize them all and then maybe try to change the individual ones into something a little different. So these two are the same, randomize. We can also reverse these. we can loop them, and we can also change the volume and have a global envelope between all of the samples together. If you actually click on a sampler, then we can kind of do all the same functions that we had from before, but we've got our individual sample envelopes, the tone, which is a high and low pass filter with a little bit of drive, and then we've got the adjustments with panning and tuning and a general volume knob, etc. So one cool thing about this that actually makes this really interesting is that whenever this is set to loop, you actually have a loop time. So it's going to repeat based off of that. And whenever you have the animated orb that's coming to it, right, you can set these different times that allow it to repeat between these different times of like sample A versus sample B, perhaps that's like 1/4 versus 1/8. And then it kind of blends in that way. And that's like one of the most, it's really cool. And obviously you've heard it, it sounds really cool in action. And it's a really unique way to kind of, I guess, like do this like octa crossfade between all of the sampler engines. You've also got arpeggiators on this. And it's not, you know, the most robust, but it does have some cool options to where you can have up to 16 steps. It's got octaves, it's got swing, it's got MIDI through. And you can also change the length, the velocity, and the pitch of that, and even upload your own presets in between. There is also some stereo width. You've got a key range, you've got pitch tracking, and then you've got some glide. So there's tons of options that you can get into. Even though it's not granular, there's still a lot of options that you can morph in between that make this like really cool. That probably would be my biggest wish list feature for this particular synth, because imagine if even if you only had 1 or 2 granular engines. Of course, 8 would be amazing, but even if you only had 1 or 2, being able to kind of morph between all of that and like amalgamate the sounds would definitely add another layer of complexity and depth to getting lost in this particular plugin. One thing that I forgot to mention within the sampler section that's perhaps really fun and really cool is that what you can do is if you go through all the trouble of customizing a single engine, say you have this on loop with different loop times and it's playing at an up arpeggiator that has this all, you can come back here to the overview, you can right click, you can copy the corner and then right click and go and paste the corner into here and then just change the sample in order to create quick variations in between. You can also add your own samples if you want to, but I find that there is a really amazing selection of kind of preset samples and presets in general to kind of select from that will keep you busy for a while. The main thing that we all saw that is the most important perhaps is the orbit. And if you turn this off, then you can kind of manually morph between all of these by dragging here. And then you can see here that we're not really accessing the ones in the back. So you can hold shift and kind of drag these in the back. So this will be your depth. And then if you hit command and click, it'll drag everything back to the center. But where the magic happens, of course, is turning the orbit motion on. And then just kind of seeing if there's any of the 40 presets that seem interesting. If you click up here, you can actually randomize the orbit between any of the presets, or you can actually make like your own, which is really cool. It's really awesome, man. And this is probably one of the most ingenious features of a plugin that I've seen in a long time, just because it has this depth to it. Obviously, right? But it also seems like it works in that way just because of how it moves in between those samples. So yeah, within creating a new orbit, it's pretty easy. You kind of just go from step 1 to step 2 and add however many steps that you want to do. But you pretty much start here and then you say, all right, well, we're going to go there. Then on step 2, you can make it go to this way. Then on step 3, you keyframe it here, add a step 4, and then you can drag this into any position that you want to. So I'm going to go here and drag it there, and now you can see that this is going to kind of be our own custom kind of like orbit maker. But aside from that, I think that just kind of switching between these presets in general, switching between all that is pretty easy, and I encourage you to just get lost in like doing this because it's really fun. All right, so we've talked about the main tab. Over here in the mod section, this is where you can add in your modulators. And by default, there are 4 LFOs, and you have the decision to choose between a sine, triangle, saw, square, and a custom, to where you just click on this and you can create your own custom LFOs in this way. Now, it's not quite as robust as something like Serum or Vital, but at the same time, it definitely does the job to where you can create your own custom stuff. And one other thing that I do wish that they add to this is a random both in sample and hold, and then a random as far as like a smooth one, just because it kind of adds to the like the overall interest of like what the nature of the plugin is. It's still fine though. Assigning stuff to a modulator is really easy. You just click on an LFO and you drag to a particular parameter, and anything that you can modulate here will actually show up within a box. Now you can see here that not everything is something that you can necessarily modulate, and that's okay. But if you're trying to just kind of like do stuff in quick mode, or you're trying to be like really meticulous with the modulation that you do, you've got your mod matrix here that I actually really like. Now, typically a mod matrix is very confusing and convoluted just because you will click on this and then you'll have like this huge list to choose from. But this actually makes it easy because it gives you these general categories here that all have the same kind of like outlook that you would find. And then you just find your target and say, okay, global filter. And now you can change that within the macro here. The thing with this though is that there are some things that you can't modulate that I wish you could, and I'll talk more about that when we get to the effects, but they do an excellent job of teaching you how to use a mod matrix just by having some small visual guides. And that actually is a huge step for Lunacy.Audio for this in particular. So going on to the effects, we have a filter, EQ, distortion, dynamics, chorus, delay, reverb, and limiter. I'll kind of just go ahead and cover these quickly. Now with this, it's pretty much just a typical filter. So you turn that on and then you've got typical like EQ style bands of your filter that you can see here. Now, one thing that I wish that you could do with this is maybe like, it would definitely be cool if you had another filter over here, which technically you do if you remember of having the individual kind of filters between the engines, but it would be kind of nice if like I had an outlook or like a signal chain to see like where exactly everything is going. But even still, right, if I could rearrange this, or at least if I knew the kind of like chain output, then that would be a little bit easier to discover. The other thing with this, and this is what I was talking about with being able to use this for modulators, is that this EQ, like you can have like an insane amount of these. I think like I went up to like 20 something and I didn't even, like I just stopped because there's no reason to. But look how many points that you can just kind of drag. You could do some amazing stuff with that. And just imagine if, you know, you had the ability to orbit the effects in that way, right? Because right now the orbit just kind of moves between the sample engines, which already is a huge step. But imagine if you could change that and make that work with the effects as well. That'd be pretty darn awesome. So the distortion actually sounds really cool. You've got a saturator, wave shaper, and bit crusher, and this is kind of just like some nice warmth. Then we've also got a wave shaper, which we have a few different modes to choose from: subtle, crispy, toasty, cooked, on fire. Then we've got a really nice compressor actually. It goes from being super subtle to super extreme. So you definitely can make stuff louder in that way just by messing with the dynamics. Then we've got a chorus and phaser over here. We've got the phaser. That sounds super cool. We've got a delay, so we've got both left and right, so you can do your ping pong, and these can be changed individually. Or you can have them move independently at your own time. Which can also be really cool for sound design stuff. Then the reverb sounds great. It's really huge, and you have both a simple and convolution. Unfortunately, you can only use a selection of impulses, but at the same time, I do think that they sound really good. The castle is obviously my favorite because castles are my thing. And then we have a limiter that you can use at the end. And as you can see by default, the post gain is turned up by quite a bit. And the reason why is because like one quirk that I have with this is it's actually really quiet when you upload a new preset. So if I were to initialize this, then if I go here, maybe I randomize the sounds, it's kind of quiet. And if you set the orb to motion, then you can tell like it makes the sound kind of dim, kind of quiet in that way. And so for me, I usually have to come in here and turn the limiter up by quite a bit, which makes sense because gain staging is, you know, obviously a good thing and a normal thing, but I would like to turn it down first in gain stage as opposed to it already start being quiet, just because, well, I don't know, that's just the way that I personally work. But with that, all these effects, they all sound really good. And then of course you can modulate most of the settings on here. It would be cool if you did have, for one, the ability to, again, use your own impulses and again modulate the EQ bands to such a degree, but they definitely give you stuff to work with, and that's not really, the effects aren't really the selling point of this in the first place. And of course you could always just turn all of these off and modulate stuff with your own EQs or whatever, or modulate stuff with your own effects or whatever, but I definitely like the way that all this stuff sounds. So at a glance, the thing that is really cool about this is that it's really easy to just get stuff up and going. Again, you can initialize this, randomize this, randomize that, see what it comes out. Like, this is already usable to me. So if I came into here, I added some reverb. Again, I'm gonna have to turn this up a bit, but this is really cool. Just a few clicks, and it's something that has enough accessibility to it to where you don't have to go super far, but it also has a lot of depth to it to where if you get really meticulous with the kind of sounds that you use in between, it's very easy to get really cool stuff. So some last features that I want to cover, and I know that I'm not covering quite everything, but for one, it's got an eco mode in case if you are kind of already using a lot of CPU for whatever reason. And it also has the ability to resize via here. So you can zoom in all the way up to 200% to make it very large. Or for me, I think I'll probably just keep it at maybe 150. You can also change the color. You can't really change the skin, but you can change the color between all of this. And I actually really like the color palette that they have. I do hope that they add more to this just because it looks really nice, but at the same time, you know, you definitely can't complain. So overall, I think that this plugin definitely has a lot to offer, and clearly, as you can tell, it's made for pads and soundscapes and, you know, plucks or whatever, but it's meant to be in a way that still sounds organic and doesn't sound too perfect. In the future, I do hope that they add either a granular engine, an additive engine would be really cool too, even if it's relatively simple. But there's a lot of possibilities to be found. And if you guys have seen my tutorials on making soundscapes and stuff, this is a great complement to that. Now, one other thing that is really interesting about this is that currently I don't think that they have a demo. I checked on their website and I checked on Plugin Boutique, but I didn't see anything. So maybe if you reach out to them and ask for a trial version or something, or maybe I missed it, that's definitely something to consider. And while I do like this plugin, I would definitely say that you should demo it for yourself to see if it's for you. It's currently priced at $250 on Lunacy.Audio, but there's definitely a lot of fun to be had, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have about this in the comment section or so. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this review. Thank you again to Lunacy.Audio. I really like what you guys are doing, and I can't wait to see what future iterations hold for that. But that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.